No one imagined carrots could grow here. Not in this place. Not in a land where the ground cracks like old bone, where the wind carries nothing but dust, and where even the toughest crops refuse to rise. And yet today in the heart of the Sahel, something impossible is happening. 40,000 hectares of carrots, bright orange, perfectly formed, pulled straight out of sand that once killed every seed it touched. To the world it looks like a miracle. To Ibrahim Traoré, it is simply phase one. Foreign analysts insist it's agricultural propaganda. Scientists claim it violates everything they know about soil biology. Critics laugh and say carrots in the desert impossible. But the farmers harvesting them don't laugh. They look down at the roots in their hands, heavy, clean, alive, and they whisper the same thing. The land has started to remember, because something is happening beneath the sand, something much bigger than carrots. So the question is not how Traoré grew food in a dead desert. The question is, what else is growing under the ground he just woke up? It began the way many revolutions begin in Traoré's Burkina Faso, quietly without ceremony. At 3:12 a.m., the Ministry of Agri-Sovereignty uploaded a single document to its public archive, a dry technical PDF titled Sahel Root Project, Carrot Belt Phase Uncompleted. Most people ignored it until the footage arrived. State television released aerial shots at sunrise, 40,000 hectares of bright green carrot tops, waving in the wind arranged in immaculate rows carved straight into a desert that once swallowed every sign of life. The anchor's voice trembled as he read the script. The Sahel is breathing again. By mid-morning, the world was in shock. Traoré himself visited the carrot belt later that day. No grand speech, no parade, just him walking through rows of emerald foliage rising from golden sand. Beside him, engineers held tablets showing readings no scientist expected: stable soil moisture, nutrient cycling, microbial activity returning, and root depth reaching well beyond 7 feet in some zones. The desert should not allow this. Carrots should not survive here, let alone thrive. Reveal number one came shortly after official data confirmed the carrot belt produced its first 20,000 tons of crops in record time. Enough to supply the northern provinces for months and still leave a surplus for export. International media erupted. CNN Carrots in the Desert, How BBC Burkina Faso Defies Agricultural Logic. Le Monde Traoré's Root Strategy, Reuters Miracle or Manipulation. Inside Burkina Faso, the reactions were mixed. Young people celebrated. To them, this was another proof that the Sahel could be reborn one crop at a time. Older generations were skeptical. They had buried too many hopes in this land. They knew the desert could give and take away. A man in Gorom told a reporter, "If carrots grow here, then the world has changed more than I thought." Meanwhile, global analysts demanded explanations. How did carrots, a root crop requiring soft, nutrient-rich soil, burrow into rock-hard desert crust? How did they hold moisture? Why did they grow faster than normal? Officials offered a simple answer: FogNet, the same moisture capture system used for Traoré's earlier agricultural projects. But the numbers didn't add up. FogNet alone could not create deep, wet soil at scale. Something else was happening underground. Satellite images revealed strange heat signatures, linear patterns tracing the root zones like veins. Not wiring, not irrigation. Something biological. Foreign soil scientists, unable to enter the restricted carrot belt, analyzed public data and reached a startling conclusion. Either the soil is being regenerated at an unprecedented speed, or someone is modifying what lies beneath it. The carrot belt wasn't just feeding people, it was changing the earth. Carrot yields climbed, moisture increased, the sand darkened, the ground softened. One journalist wrote, "It is as if the desert remembers how to be a field." But buried inside a second, unnoticed government file was a single line that raised even more questions. RootScan data acquisition complete. RootScan, a word no one understood, a word no one was supposed to see. And so beneath all the celebration, beneath every headline and harvest, a single question emerged, whispered by scientists, politicians, and curious farmers alike. What exactly is Traoré doing under the sand? What the world didn't know that the carrots weren't chosen for their fruit, but for their roots. Behind every improbable project in Traoré's Burkina Faso, there is always a hidden blueprint, quiet, deliberate, and far deeper than the public imagines. And the carrot belt was no exception. On paper, it was agriculture. In speeches, it was food security. But in reality, it was something much more ambitious. The truth surfaced through a document leaked from the Ministry of Biosovereignty, a file marked confidential, Roots Can Subterranean Regeneration Initiative. Inside, researchers explained why carrots of all crops had been chosen. Not for their taste, not for their yield, but for their roots. Carrots are tap-rooted plants. Their roots drill downward, piercing hard soil, navigating cracks, breaking compacted layers. They go where other roots refuse to go. But these were not normal carrots. Reveal number 2 shook the scientific community. The Sahel carrot strains were genetically enhanced to form deep-structure biopathways, capable of tunneling through desert crust and expanding soil porosity by up to 600%. These roots were engineered to be explorers, to carve pathways, to open sealed layers, to revive dead zones, to behave like a living drill but softer, steadier, and smarter. And that was only the beginning. The leak described how each carrot root carried nanosensors that measured soil moisture, mineral density, electrical conductivity, micro cracks in subterranean rock, underground water movement. This wasn't farming, this was mapping. RootsCan's real mission was clear: create a biological network capable of scanning the desert floor without machines, mining equipment, or foreign contractors. A silent underground cartographer. Every hectare of carrots acted like a sensitive probe, sending data through a mesh of root-to-root contact and microbial communication. And the results were shocking. The carrots were detecting water pockets, mineral clusters, and subsurface anomalies, miles-deep information that would normally require millions of dollars in geological surveys. To Traoré's administration, this data meant sovereignty. To foreign powers, it meant trouble. Yet the most remarkable discovery was not about resources. It was the soil. Once the carrot roots broke through the hardened sand, microbes returned. Moisture followed. Organic matter accumulated. The land began regenerating itself slowly at first, then rapidly. A buried line in the document stated, root networks demonstrate emergent behavior. Moisture retention increases exponentially with root density. Emergent behavior, a term used more often in AI than in agriculture. It meant the system was doing something on its own, something not explicitly designed. And it was working. Inside Burkina Faso, officials kept repeating that everything was under control. But behind closed doors, scientists were realizing something else. The roots were repairing parts of the desert faster than expected. Too fast. One internal email read, "These are no longer just crops. They are tools, and the land is responding to them." Foreign governments grew uneasy. France accused Burkina Faso of using agriculture to conduct geological reconnaissance. The EU demanded transparency. The US called it unauthorized bioprobing. But Traoré remained silent. Not defiant, just silent, which worried world leaders even more. Meanwhile, in the villages near the carrot belt, farmers began noticing unusual changes. The soil felt softer. The wells tasted cleaner. Some areas even started showing new plant life, wild grass emerging after decades of absence. It was as if the carrots weren't just collecting data. They were unlocking something. But the most chilling detail of the RootsCan leak was found on the final page. A single sentence, heavily redacted. Phase 2 requires root density sufficient to trigger subterranean opening at depths exceeding. The exact number was blacked out. Someone didn't want the world to know how deep the carrots were going. And the question spread like wildfire. If Traoré is using carrots to wake up what's under the desert, what exactly lies beneath it? When news of RootsCan leaked, reactions didn't just ripple across Burkina Faso, they detonated. Inside the country, young people celebrated. To them, this was proof that Traoré had found a way to outsmart the desert without begging for international aid. On social media, they called the carrot belt, the orange line, a bright scar of hope across the Sahel. But the older generation, they weren't convinced. To them, the desert wasn't dead. It was dangerous. It punished mistakes. Many whispered, if you dig too deep, the desert digs back. Scientists abroad echoed that fear in less poetic, more alarming terms. Germany warned that RootsCan might disrupt subterranean pressure zones. France claimed Burkina Faso was secretly using agriculture to locate uranium deposits. The US expressed serious concern about unregulated geobiological surveying. Some analysts went further. If Burkina controls underground water maps, they control the Sahel. But the real reaction, the one that mattered, came from the land itself. Villagers living near the carrot belt began reporting strange sensations beneath their feet. Sometimes at dawn, sometimes late at night, the soil would vibrate softly, a gentle pulse, like a distant engine under the sand. Officials dismissed the reports as thermal expansion, a natural desert phenomenon. But then came the eyewitness, the one nobody could ignore. His name was Isufu Dauda, a 58-year-old herder from near Tinafolo, a man who had lived his entire life following the desert's moods, its storms, its silences, its invisible boundaries. He became the first to witness what the carrots were really doing. One morning he walked toward the fields before sunrise. The wind was still, the sky was pale gray, and the carrot tops shimmered softly as if they were glowing. He knelt down, touched the soil, and felt a rhythm. Not heat, not movement, a rhythm. He later described it like this. It was breathing. The ground was breathing under my hand. At first neighbors laughed, but later when several others felt the same pulse, the story spread. Scientists tried to investigate, but access to the carrot belt was tightly controlled. Only government engineers and RootsCan personnel were allowed inside. Still, independent researchers gathered soil samples from the outer perimeter and discovered something astonishing. The soil around the carrot zones had higher moisture retention and unexpectedly higher electrical conductivity. Reveal number 3 confirmed the suspicion. The root network was not only mapping the desert, it was slowly rewiring it. Moisture was moving differently. Heat was dissipating slower. The ground itself was behaving like a semi-conductive membrane. Nothing like this had ever been recorded in the Sahel. International headlines exploded again. CNN carrot fields behaving like a living sensor network. The Guardian is Traoré, building a subterranean machine. France 24, African agriculture or geopolitical gambit. Meanwhile, inside Burkina Faso, families who had lived through drought after drought suddenly found themselves with cooler nights, softer soil, and small patches of wild grass returning for the first time in decades. A grandmother from the village of Seba said, "If the carrots can bring back the grass, maybe they can bring back everything." But beneath all the celebration, one unsettling question kept growing. If RootsCan is listening to the desert, what happens when the desert starts answering? And the answer came in the form of a second leak, one far more disturbing than the first. A document stamped classified, RootsCan Phase 2, contained a line that froze analysts around the world. Preliminary signs indicate root networks are opening microfractures at targeted depths. Opening fractures targeted. This wasn't just mapping the desert. This was reshaping it. The second leak did not appear on social media. It didn't circulate on WhatsApp or surface on television. It dropped quietly, anonymously into the inbox of a West African geophysicist at exactly 1:04 a.m. A single document, 71 pages, encrypted, labeled, RootsCan Phase 2 Subterranean Opening Protocol. Within hours, it was everywhere. And for the first time since the carrot belt was created, the world was afraid. Not skeptical, not amused, afraid. Because Phase 2 confirmed what many had suspected. The carrots were not just scanning the desert floor, they were cracking it open. The report described how genetically strengthened carrot roots applied micropressure into mineral seams, precise, rhythmic, almost surgical. Over weeks, this pressure created microfractures deep beneath the sand, not enough to cause collapse, not enough to disrupt the surface, but enough to unlock dead layers, allowing trapped moisture to rise and move again. The document's diagrams showed vertical tunnels of softened rock and rehydrated soil like biological elevators, carrying water upward. Scientists stared at the scans in disbelief. This wasn't just agriculture, it was terraforming. But the most chilling section of the leak wasn't the diagrams. It was a heavily redacted paragraph on page 48. Only one sentence was fully visible. Targeted fractures may allow access to sublayer reservoirs necessary for Phase 3. Access reservoirs Phase 3. What reservoirs were they talking about? Water, minerals, something else? No one could tell because the specifics had been blacked out with military-grade precision. Then came the map. A satellite overlay showing thin blue lines, moisture corridors spreading outward from the carrot belt. Not randomly, not naturally. They all curved slowly, deliberately, toward a single point beneath Burkina Faso's northern interior. A convergence zone, a place nothing was supposed to exist. A place with no roads, no wells, no villages, no mines. A geologist examining the leak muttered on live broadcast. "This is controlled. Someone is guiding the desert from below." And the world froze again, because the one question no expert could answer was simple. What exactly is Traoré trying to reach? Then as fear escalated, the final piece of footage leaked, shot on a soldier's phone inside the carrot belt late at night. The ground begins to vibrate in a soft repeating pattern. Then a carrot top, just one sways though there's no wind. Then another. Then an entire row moves rippling like a wave. One soldier whispers, "It's following something under the sand." The video cuts to black. And suddenly every headline around the world echoed the same terrifying question. Is Burkina Faso opening something beneath the desert? The world demanded answers. And for once, Traoré didn't wait. 2 days after the phase number 2 leak, he authorized a controlled release of root scan data, not everything, but just enough to shift the global narrative. And the truth was more astonishing than anyone expected. The carrot belt wasn't opening random fractures. It was opening ancient ones, natural pathways, buried beneath layers of dead sand, sealed off by centuries of drought and erosion. Reveal number 4 arrived in a technical briefing from Burkina Faso's National Hydrogeologic Institute. RootScan has reactivated dormant water channels last mapped 600, 800 years ago. In other words, the desert once had rivers. RootScan was waking them up. The briefing included images showing water vapor rising through microfractures created by the carrot roots. Slow, steady, controlled. Not destruction, restoration. Most shocking was a time-lapse sequence showing soil from Zone Delta. Day by day, the sand darkened as moisture trapped below began to rise into the upper layers. A scientist summarized it simply. This isn't breaking the desert, it's teaching the desert how to breathe again. But not everyone saw it that way. Within hours, officials in Paris, Brussels, and Washington issued emergency statements. France accused Burkina Faso of unregulated hydrogeomanipulation. The EU called for immediate suspension of all subterranean interference. The U.S. Department of Defense warned that RootScan could destabilize regional geology. One American analyst even claimed, "This is underground warfare disguised as agriculture." Commentators began speculating that Burkina Faso might redirect water flows away from neighboring countries or, worse, towards strategic zones. Environmental NGOs accused Traoré of tampering with natural fault lines. Mining corporations were furious. RootScan's unprecedented clarity threatened the secrecy of long-protected mineral maps. But Traoré's response was not defensive, it was precise. In an unexpected address, he stood before the National Assembly with a calm, measured tone. For a century, foreign companies drilled holes into our land and called it development. Today, our roots touch the earth gently, and they call it danger. Why? Because this time, they are not the ones holding the map. The chamber erupted in applause. But Traoré wasn't finished. He displayed satellite data showing that RootScan's moisture channels were stabilizing, not destabilizing the soil. He showed evidence that water tables were rising gradually, not chaotically. He revealed that 14 previously dry wells in the northern provinces had begun refilling for the first time in decades. Then he delivered the sentence that would echo around the world. We are not opening the desert, we are reopening our future. Global reaction split instantly. Across Africa, scientists hailed the project as revolutionary. Ghana offered collaboration. Ethiopia proposed integrating RootScan into the Nile Basin Restoration Plan. Mali requested a shared data treaty. But outside Africa, the backlash intensified. A European commentator shouted on live TV, "If Burkina Faso controls underground water, it controls the region." A mining lobbyist complained, "RootScan is nationalizing information that should belong to global markets." But the strongest pushback came from a French geologist who insisted, "You cannot resurrect ancient water corridors without consequences." Burkina Faso answered with data and with a voice the world had not yet heard. Her name was Aïcha Bationo, the young hydrobiologist working inside the RootScan monitoring unit. She stood at a podium holding a glass vial of water drawn from a newly reactivated aquifer. Her voice steady, she said, "This water is older than every nation judging us. We didn't steal it. We returned it to the surface." Her statement went viral across Africa. But Aïcha had one more revelation, one that silenced even the harshest critics. She presented seismic charts showing that RootScan's microfractures were not random. They were responding to pressure slowing or accelerating based on moisture levels. It meant RootScan wasn't just altering the land, it was listening to it, a living feedback system, a controlled adaptive biological instrument. Aïcha ended with, "We didn't build a machine. We partnered with the ground beneath us. And for the first time, it's speaking back." The room fell silent. Even foreign envoys had no immediate response. And suddenly the world realized, RootScan wasn't a threat. It was a breakthrough one that no existing political framework could explain, regulate, or contain. But one unanswered question still loomed like a shadow. What exactly lies inside that convergence zone root scan is moving toward? While the world argued, speculated, and accused, the truth did not come from politicians or foreign experts. It came from a young woman working in a quiet lab at the edge of the carrot belt. Her name was Mariama Ouedraogo, 29 years old, a hydrogeophysicist who once dreamed of becoming a teacher. Her father died during the drought of 2018. Her mother survived because a single well in their village held water long enough for them to escape. Mariama grew up believing the desert could kill without warning. RootsCan gave her the first reason in her life to believe it could save instead. Every day she monitored underground resonance patterns transmitted through the carrot root sensors. Most days were the same pulses of moisture shifts, of mineral density, light tremors, as the roots pushed deeper. But then came the morning everything changed. At 5:42 a.m., her monitor lit up with a pattern she had never seen before. Not a pulse, not a moisture spike, not seismic noise. A signal, clear, repeating, structured. At first she thought it was interference, a software glitch, a corrupted node. But when she filtered the readings, slowed them down, and plotted them across RootsCan's entire network, a revelation emerged. Every root cluster was responding at the same time. Not random, not isolated, coordinated. Like a choir, like a heartbeat linking thousands of acres together. Reveal number 5, RootsCan wasn't just scanning the desert. It was synchronizing with something beneath it. Mariama rushed to the field with a portable resonance sensor. As she drove a metal probe into the ground, she felt it faint, warm vibrations rising upward in rhythmic intervals. Then she realized something that chilled her down to the bone. The signal wasn't rising from the carrot fields. It was rising toward them, toward the root network, toward the system Traoré had grown. She returned to the lab and layered the resonance data with satellite scans. Her jaw dropped. The signals originated from the convergence zone, that strange empty patch of desert that RootsCan's moisture corridors kept bending toward. But now it wasn't empty, it was active. The ground beneath the zone was shifting not violently, but in controlled, almost mathematical intervals. Mariama gathered every dataset she could. She ran geophysical simulations, reconstructed the subterranean structure, checked old colonial-era maps. And then she saw it. A massive underground chamber, not man-made, not hollow, but formed naturally centuries ago when the Sahel still held rivers. A buried cavern system, untouched, unknown, lost to drought and sand. But now, for the first time in hundreds of years, it was waking. She rushed to Ouagadougou to brief Traoré's scientific council. Standing before a room of generals, ministers, and engineers, she projected the convergence map and said, RootsCan is not breaking the desert. It is reconnecting with an ancient water vault beneath it. A minister asked if this was dangerous. Mariama shook her head gently. It is stable, but it is responding to the roots. What you planted is not destroying the desert. It is communicating with it. A general scoffed. Land does not communicate. Mariama looked at him calmly and replied, it does when it remembers what it used to be. She explained how microfractures opened by RootsCan allowed ancient moisture pockets to rehydrate the upper layers. How the carrot roots acted as soft conduits guiding pressure, dispersing heat, and stabilizing soil. How the cavern was releasing vapor again, slowly, safely, consistently. One member of the council, stunned, asked, but why is the convergence zone sending resonance signals? Mariama exhaled. Her answer was simple. Because it is full, and it wants to rise. Around the world, critics kept shouting about collapse, risk, instability. But inside Burkina Faso, the narrative changed completely. RootsCan was not just agriculture. It was not espionage. It was not extraction. It was restoration of a river system older than the country itself. Mariama found her mother that evening and told her, the desert held water for centuries. We didn't know how to ask for it. Now the roots are asking for us. But there was one final question, heavy, unresolved, and larger than any scientific explanation. If RootsCan can awaken a buried river, what else can it awaken? The desert has always been described as empty, silent, unforgiving, a place where life goes to vanish. But today that silence is broken, not by machines, not by governments, but by roots, millions of them weaving beneath the sand like threads stitching a forgotten tapestry back together. Because the carrot belt was never just about food, it was about memory. Noibo, what it means for Burkina Faso. For the first time in generations, water is returning to places that had been dry for a lifetime. Villages with collapsing wells now drink from sources they thought were lost forever. Families who once waited for foreign aid now watch their land regenerate by its own will. Rootscan didn't just feed people. It restored dignity and control over the very ground under their feet. Kuvuk. What it means for the Sahel across Mali, Niger, and Chad, scientists are beginning to see the same ancient channels reflected in their own soil maps. If Burkina Faso succeeds, the entire Sahel could follow, not with drilling rigs, not with foreign loans, but with roots. The region long dismissed as barren may become the world's largest reclaimed ecosystem, a green spine running through the desert. Tuancao, what it means for the world. For nations that have dominated extraction for centuries, RootsCan is a warning technology no longer belongs only to the powerful. Not when biology can do what machines cannot. Not when the land can store data, move water, and restore itself without permission. Not when Africa learns to speak the language of the earth and the earth answers back. Because Burkina Faso didn't just grow carrots. It awakened something older, deeper, and far more resilient than any political order. And the question now, the one haunting every institution that once claimed ownership over African soil, is simple. If a desert can remember its rivers, what else might it remember next? In the next episode, RootsCan Phase 3, when the underground chamber opens. Please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and continue the journey of exploration. Africa bows to no one. Disclaimer, this video is fictional storytelling created for education, commentary, and entertainment. It is not a factual report or official information. Any similarities to real events are coincidental. Please enjoy it as creative content only.